South Africa once stood as the darkest symbol of racial oppression in Africa. Apartheid was built on race, fear, and brutal exclusion. Black South Africans were treated as strangers in their own land. Segregation was written into the law. Whites only was more than a sign, it was a system. Families lived under surveillance and daily humiliation. Townships became prisons without walls. Black people were stripped of land, freedom, dignity, and voice. Apartheid was a system of racial terror, and black life was controlled by the design. Resistance grew because silence was no longer possible. Sharpeville exposed apartheid's violence to the world. Soweto erupted. Soweto proved even children would rise against oppression. Robben Island became a monument to sacrifice. Prison could not bury hope. Mandela's prison years became a symbol of unbroken resistance. The ANC carried the dream of freedom through exile and struggle. South Africa's liberation was never a fight fought alone. Africa answered South Africa's cry. Zambia opened its doors to exiles and organizers. Kenneth Kaunda hosted ANC members and made Lusaka a key base for the anti-apartheid struggle. Zambia became a heartbeat of liberation. Julius Nyerere offered military training camps, political education, and diplomatic backing. Tanzania became a sanctuary for struggle. Samafco became a school for the future of freedom. Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe supported and sheltered ANC members. Zimbabwe offered safe havens. Africa absolutely refused to back down. Nigeria became one of apartheid's fiercest enemies. General Olusegun Obasanjo was an outspoken supporter. The Southern Africa Relief Fund made resistance national. Ordinary Nigerians paid into the struggle. The Mandela tax turned solidarity into sacrifice. The nation paid an economic price to isolate apartheid. Oil was withheld in the name of justice. Boycotts became a weapon. The 1976 Olympics boycott shook global sport. Ghana fought apartheid with passports, training, money, boycotts, and diplomacy. Kwame Nkrumah warned that no African freedom was complete alone and strongly promoted Pan-African unity. Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea provided safe haven and an operational base for exiled leaders. Agostinho Neto of Angola and Samora Machel of Mozambique gave supports and sheltered exiled anti-apartheid activists. Haile Selassie of Ethiopia gave early support to liberation figures. Muammar Gaddafi of Libya backed the ANC with money and logistics. Algeria backed anti-apartheid armed movements with money and arms. Botswana quietly helped the underground survive. Lesotho took risks despite its vulnerability and gave support to exiled individuals. Eswatini became a dangerous transit route for resistance. Exile was painful, but Africa made survival possible. The struggle lived because Africa refused to look away. South Africa was wholeheartedly defended by the African continent. African nations rose in unity to resist apartheid injustice. They gave money, refuge, training, education, diplomacy, and blood. Apartheid was a law-backed oppression. African nations refused to normalize apartheid. Commonwealth pressure helped tighten the noose. Freedom in 1994 felt like a continental victory. Long lines at the ballot box became history in motion. The new South Africa rose on the shoulders of many nations. Mandela walked free, but he never walked alone.
The government and the people of Nigeria, on the basis of this crowd here, on my way from the airport, I was met by thousands of cheering Nigerians, which convinced me that I was not only among friends, lot of financial and material support. They have assisted us, not only in the form of funds, and in that respect, they have been among the most generous donors to our cause. They have also assisted us in the form of teachers, doctors, architects, and they have given scholarships to our children to study in the universities of this country.
A dream of unity seemed alive in 1994, but freedom did not erase inequality. Wealth stayed concentrated, while poverty endured. Townships still carried the scars of the past. Unemployment began feeding anger and frustration. In that anger, some turned on foreigners. The victims were often other Black Africans. Migrants became scapegoats for deeper national failures. Xenophobia turned solidarity into suspicion. Families packed in fear. Children hid with luggage and blankets. Shops owned by African migrants were attacked. Streets fell silent after violence. Markets became empty symbols of panic. The same continent that once saved South Africa now faced rejection. Fear spread faster than facts. Rumors became fuel for mob rage. Brotherhood gave way to blame. The old language of exclusion returned in a new form. The contradiction was devastating. Shelters filled with displaced African lives. Churches became places of grief and prayer. The memory of apartheid collided with the reality of xenophobia. The past stood in judgment over the present. Some governments began repatriating their citizens. African migrants carried not only bags, but betrayal. Mozambican migrants crossed back carrying trauma, loss, and silence. Ghanaian immigrants were repatriated as solidarity turned into rescue. Nigerian immigrants were forced to leave, a country Africa once helped save. Malawian families fled the flames and returned home in fear. Zimbabwean nationals were pulled back from the edge of xenophobic violence. Across Africa, governments moved to rescue their citizens from South Africa's unrest. Return flights became symbols of continental heartbreak. Diplomats all over the continent demanded answers. President Ramaphosa gave excuses. African voices asked South Africa to remember. Remember the refuge you were given. Remember the money spent for your freedom. Remember the passports, the schools, the camps, the sanctions. Remember the blood price paid beyond your borders. Remember the leaders who stood beside your struggle. Remember the people who believed your freedom was theirs too. Xenophobia does not erase apartheid, it dishonors its defeat. Africa's liberation story cannot end in fear of one another. South Africa's greatest legacy should be justice, not exclusion. Healing begins when truth is faced. Across Africa, patience snapped as some nations answered, with anger, boycotts, and rescue flights. Calls grew for sanctions, corporate retaliation, and an African stand against humiliation. FIFA World Cup 2026 became a brutal eye-opener. As South Africa played, most Africans stood with its opponents, asking whether solidarity had been betrayed. Cheers rose for Mexico and Canada. As South Africa's image darkened under xenophobic shame, for many African fans, this was no longer just football. It was heartbreak, protest, and memory on the pitch. The continent deserves better than recycled hatred. The future still depends on memory. Africa's hope survives only if Africans choose one another again. South Africa's freedom was won by the continent. That history should have built a continent of deeper brotherhood, Instead, today's xenophobia forces Africa to confront a painful truth. Follow and subscribe to Histonicles for more.